Hey friends, Steve Guttenberg here, and I am the audiophiliac. Today I'm going to talk about a seminal recording. Certainly for people of my generation, although many generations that followed me, Led Zeppelin II and Led Zeppelin I, but Led Zeppelin II especially. This record spoke to me. It came out in 1969, and you have to think about it in the context of the time. That the sound of the recording was so far ahead of anything else out there. The Beatles, the Stones, Cream, they make great music, but they didn't have the sound and the power of Led Zeppelin II and Led Zeppelin I, but I think more so for Led Zeppelin II. The drums, especially John Bonham's drums, just blasted out of those speakers. I mean, the Beatles, the Stones, they sounded tiny by comparison. The compression that Eddie Kramer, the engineer, and other engineers that worked on this record, and Jimmy Page, who produced the record, it was a sea change. It really was. Now, one of the things that I found out about this record as the years went by was that Jimmy Page was, unlike most rock musicians of that time period, he could read music, and he was a session musician. He played on hundreds, possibly thousands of other recordings by other people in the 60s, because he could just go into a studio, put the chart in front of him, and he would just play it. Most rock musicians can't read music, and they didn't have the skills that Jimmy Page had. So he had a lot of experience, more than a typical rock musician of that time period, because he played on so many other people's records. And he said in this interview that he learned how to produce and make records by watching other people do it badly. Like he was, basically keeping track of all this stuff in his head, like, oh man, these people are clueless, they don't know how to do this, they don't know how to do that. When I get my chance to make a record, I'm gonna make a great record. So he also obviously heard people who were doing it well, and I'm sure he took note of that. But the thing is, by having that experience to draw upon, Led Zeppelin was the next phase. It was a forecast of the 70s, what rock music would sound like in the 70s, but this record came out in 1969 and Led Zeppelin I came out in 68. So, but to me, at that time period, it was the record. I dragged this record around every time I went to a hi-fi store to listen to something. Led Zeppelin II would be my choice. Not necessarily Whole Lotta Love or Heartbreaker, but those drums, and of course Jimmy Page's guitar and Robert Plant's vocals. I wanted to feel them. I wanted to experience them. And if I went to a store and somebody said, hey, we got this new cartridge from Microacoustics, I think that was a big thing for me at the time, and I would play Led Zeppelin on it and go, yeah man, now we're talking, and I would plunk down my money and buy a cartridge, or whatever. So it was kind of my reference for a long time, among other records, but Led Zeppelin II especially was the one for me. It spoke to me, still does actually, but more as nostalgia than something I would listen to today. But and by the way, Jimmy Page is in that movie with Edge and Jack White. It Might Get Loud. It's three guitarists, talking and playing, and just seeing Jimmy Page in that environment with younger musicians, other hot guitar players. It's good. Look for it. It's called It Might Get Loud. It's a DVD, Blu-ray, and I'm sure it's on YouTube or something. But there's good stuff in there about sound, because he does talk about the sound of Led Zeppelin in that documentary. I think you've got it all now. My name is still Steve Guttenberg. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show. It comes up daily. Please subscribe if you like this sort of thing, and come back often. I'll see you next time.